Welcome, welcome. I'm John. Italy makes more wine than any other country on earth. 20 regions, over 1,000 indigenous grape varieties. Wine has been made on this peninsula since before the Roman Empire. And yet, for collectors, Italy really comes down to three things: Barolo, Brunello, and the Super Tuscans. These are the wines that show up at auction. These are the wines that serious collectors sell. And each one has a completely different story. Barolo? It's just Burgundy's Italian cousin. Single grape, terroir-obsessed, village and vineyard driven. Brunello? It's a Tuscan purist dream. One grape, one region, strict rules. And Super Tuscans? The Super Tuscans are the rebels who threw the rulebook out in its entirety and made some of the most expensive wines in Italy by breaking every regulation the government had set up. This video, we're going to cover all three: what separates them, who makes the best ones, and how to start collecting Italian wine without getting overwhelmed by a country that has so much more to offer than any other country in the wine planet. Now, fair warning, my Italian pronunciation, it's a work in process. So I'm fluent in English, I'm solid in Spanish, and my Italian is enthusiastic. So let's get into it. Barolo, the king of wine. Let's start in the Piemonte, or as we call it, the Piedmont, in the northwest corner of Italy, the Langhe Hills. Fog and truffles and nebbiolo. Barolo is made from 100% Nebbiolo. It's just one grape. So it's like Burgundy is Pinot Noir and Champagne is Chardonnay, Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. Barolo is Nebbiolo and nothing else, which means terroir is everything. Where the grapes grow, who makes the wine. That's the whole game. And if you watch the Burgundy episode, this is going to feel really familiar, because Barolo is organized in the exact same way. It's about villages and vineyards. And so let's start with the 5 villages. Now listen, there are 11 communes that can produce Barolo, but only 5 of them actually matter for collectors. And I want to go over each of them. First of all, there's Barolo, the village. In this village, they tend to produce the elegant perfume wines. If you think about finesse over power, so like La Mora, that's the largest commune that has similar elegance, often approachable younger. So some people are going to call La Mora the Gevrey Chambertin of Barolo. It's like a really big name with a lot of producers and a range of quality. Castiglione Folletto. It sits between the elegant and the powerful. It's a balanced village in some of the most complete wines. Monforte d'Alba. Power, structure, wines that need time. So if La Mora is elegance, Monforte is muscle. Serralunga d'Alba. This is the most structured of all, iron and tar. And these are the wines that last 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. Serralunga is como the Pauillac. It's like the Pauillac of Barolo. It's just built to last. And then there's drama. Let's talk about the Barolo Wars. This actually matters to collectors because it actually does affect directly what's in your glass. Starting in the 1980s, a group of young winemakers led by people like Elio Altare and the Verzeo brothers, they looked at Bordeaux and Burgundy and they said, why are we still making wine the old way? They started using small French oak barrels called barriques. They started using shorter fermentations. They were using modern techniques. And the wines, darker, richer, and frankly, more immediately approachable. And the critics loved them. Parker loved them. Now, the traditionalists, led by Bartolo Mascarello, famously made a label that said, no barrique, no Berlusconi. He said that this is destroying the identity of Barolo. Real Barolo, to the traditionalists, meant large Slavonian oak casks called botti, long maceration, and wine that needed like 20 years before you could drink them. This war has mostly cooled. Most of the producers today are starting to land somewhere in between. But as a collector, you need to know where a producer falls on that spectrum because it's going to affect how the wine ages. Traditional style Barolo tends to be more angular when young and then it will age for longer. A modern style Barolo is much easier to drink early, but then there's some questions about its longevity. The best producers, Giacomo Conterno, for example, Mascarello, Bruno Giacosa, they're on the traditional side, or Gaha on the modern side. And they make wines that just are great no matter what side of the debate that you come down upon. Let's talk about the producers that collectors need to know. Giacomo Conterno. This really is the benchmark. Montalcino is the top wine, and it's only made in the very best vintages. It's aged for 7+ years in large botti before release, and this is arguably Italy's greatest red wine. The regular Casina Francia is also exceptional, and it's a little bit more accessible and available. Bruno Giacosa. This is another legend. The Filetto Vineyard bottlings. So what you're going to do is you're going to look for the red label, and that means Reserva. Giacosa passed away in 2018, but the estate continues. Bartolo Mascarello. This is really the spiritual heart of traditional Barolo. Really tiny production. And his daughter, Maria Teresa, continues the estate. Gaha. Angelo Gaha, the modernizer. So think about him as the Robert Mondavi of Italy. He's the person who put Italian wine onto the global stage. His single vineyard, Lango wines, are legendary, although he disclassified them from Barbaresco because he wanted to sell them under the broader Langa designation. It's very controversial, but the wines are absolutely extraordinary. Giuseppe Mascarello, not the same as Bartolo. The Mon Privato bottling from Castellone Falletto is one of the greatest single vineyard Barolos. Vietti. Luca Corrado. Multiple cru bottlings that offer a masterclass on how different vineyards express Nebbiolo. Roberto Vorosio. This is the modern camp, right? Extremely low yields, incredibly concentrated wines, small production, but big prices. Aldo Conterno. This is Giacomo's brother, and he started his own estate. It's called Grambucia. That's their top wine. This is a great pedigree. Quick note on Barbaresco. It's the same grape. It's a Nebbiolo. It's a neighboring region, but it's generally more elegant and frankly approachable than Barolo. Gaha's original estate is here. But also look for Produttori de Barbaresco. This is a cooperative that makes absolutely outstanding single vineyard wines at quite frankly reasonable prices. So this is a really good entry point if you're just starting to get into collectible Italian wine. Let's go south to Tuscany. Montalcino. A hilltop town, it's about an hour south of Florence, and it's got one wine, Brunello di Montalcino. Brunello is 100% Sangiovese. And this is not just generic Sangiovese, it's a specific clone called Sangiovese Grosso, or Brunello, which means the little dark one. The rules here are super strict. So it's 5 years of aging before release, including 2 years on oak. And for the Reserva, it's 6 years. And this is one of the most regulated wines in Italy. And that discipline is part of what makes it collectible. Unlike Barolo, where you have 5 key villages, Brunello is one town, one appellation. But the terrain, it varies dramatically. They have north-facing slopes versus south-facing slopes. They have higher elevation versus lower. They have clay versus galestro. And producers are going to tell you that the differences are significant as the different communes in Barolo. And in a way, they're not wrong. Let's talk about the founding story. Because Brunello, as we know it, was really invented by one single family, the Biondi Santi family. Ferruccio Biondi Santi isolated the Sangiovese Grosso clone in the late 1800s and made the first wines that would become Brunello. The estate, El Grepo, still exists, and the Reservas from great vintages are among the most collectible Italian wines in existence. Bottles from the 1950s and 60s are still alive. For decades, Biondi Santi was essentially alone. Brunello was a tiny, obscure appellation. Then the American market discovered it in the 1970s and 1980s, and everything changed. Producers poured in, quality rose, prices climbed. Let's talk about the scandal. So, in 2008, Italian authorities discovered that a number of Brunello producers And some of them, by the way, very well-known Brunello producers, had been secretly blending Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and other grapes into wines that were being labeled as 100% Sangiovese. That's the one rule in Brunello. There's one grape. There are no exceptions. Why were they doing it? They were breaking the rule to make darker, richer wines because they knew they would score better with international critics. But they were charging Brunello prices for something that wasn't actually Brunello. The Italians, they called it Brunellopoli. They add poli to scandals like we add gate, so Brunello Gate. Millions of bottles were investigated and reputations were destroyed, and courts were involved for years. For collectors, this is just a trust story. So when you pay a premium for Brunello, you're paying because the rules are strict. So if a producer's cheating on the grape itself, like what else are they cutting corners on? And those producers that came through clean, like Beyond de Santi, Sodara, Poggio de Soti, Salvoni, they actually gained stature. Their refusal to compromise actually became part of their brand value, and they've benefited in the long run because of it. Let's do the producers the collectors need to know. Beyond de Santi. This is the original. The Reservas are the crown jewels. The estate was acquired by EPI Group, but the winemaking continues to honor the legacy. Austere, long-lived, traditional. All right, Soldera. Case Basse. Gianfranco Soldera, one of the most legendary and controversial figures in Italian wine. He's a former insurance broker from Milan, and he bought abandoned land in 1972, and he just spent decades transforming it. His wines are made in enormous Slavonian oak casks, aged for years, and taste like nothing else in Montalcino. It's more like a Burgundy than Brunello. Soldera actually withdrew from the consorzio because he felt that the regulations didn't reflect his personal quality standards. But, interesting story. In 2012, tragedy struck. A disgruntled former employee broke into the cellar and opened the spigots on the aging casks, and he actually destroyed 6 vintages. So roughly 10 years of work flooded the floor with irreplaceable wine. Soldera rebuilt. He did pass away in 2019, but the estate continues under the family, and the wines are extremely rare and extremely expensive. Okay, Poggio de Soti. Elegant, ethereal wines that show a different side of Montalcino. It's now owned by the Cole Massery Group, but the quality has remained very high. Salvioni Cerbaiola. It's a tiny estate. It's got maybe 10,000 bottles of Brunello per year, and it's quite frankly the hardest bottle to find in all of Tuscany. Il Meronetto. Alessandro Mori. So this is another small producer with an intensely loyal following. Madonna del Grazie is the top bottling at this estate. Casanova de Neri. Giacomo Neri. This is more modern in style, but it's got like a serious depth to it. The Tenuta Nuova bottling got 100 points from Robert Parker, and this is the wine that put this estate on the global map. Fulini. This is one of the oldest families in Montalcino. They produce classic age-worthy wines that kind of fly under the radar. It's actually got really good value for a collector-grade Brunello. And don't overlook Rosso di Montalcino. This is the same grape. They have shorter aging. They release it sooner. It's not really a collector play, but it's like a great way to learn about a producer's style without spending the real Brunello pricing. Rosso di Montalcino is kind of Brunello's second wine. It's 100% Sangiovese from the same appellation, but they only have 1 year of aging required, and there's no minimum time on oak. Every year on September 1st, they release last year's harvest. So just think of it kind of like a preview. So like if you like a producer's Rosso, their Brunello will be just a deeper, more structured version of the same voice. It's like $20, $35, $40, and it goes great with food. By the way, if you love cooking and you love Italian food, collecting Italian wine isn't just like an investment. It's just a way of life. This is really a great value for an Italian red. Now we get to the entertainment, the Super Tuscans, the rule breakers. Let's talk about the rebels. Here's the backstory. Italian wine law, the DOC, and the DOCG system tells producers in each region exactly what grapes they can use, how long they have to age the wine, what they can put in a label. Let me explain the commercial reason for all this. It basically allows producers in a certain part of the world to build kind of a collective brand. Consumers know what to expect if they are getting a wine from a particular region. But these rules can also be kind of a cage. In Tuscany, for example, to be labeled Chianti, the wine had to follow a formula. And for a very long time, that formula actually required the inclusion of white grapes in what was supposed to be a red wine. But a group of producers in the 1960s and 70s looked at those rules and said, this is kind of holding us back. We can make world-class wine if we use the grapes we want to use. Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc. These are the Bordeaux varieties. But by doing that, it meant their wines couldn't carry the prestigious DOCG designation. It'd have to be labeled as simple table wine, which is vino de tavola in France. Well, they did it anyway, and the wines were extraordinary. Let's talk about the one that started it all, Sassicaia. Marchese Mario Incisa della Rocchetta. He was an Italian nobleman in Bulgari, which is a coastal area in Tuscany. Nobody really associated this, by the way, with fine wine. It was more the place where rich people would have their estates. But in the 1940s, he planted Cabernet Sauvignon cuttings that he got from Chateau Lafite Rothschild in Bordeaux. And he planted them on his estate, which was called Tenuta San Guido. For decades, this was just family wine. But in 1968, the family decided to release it commercially. By the 1970s, it was competing with and it was beating the best wines of Bordeaux in blind tastings. It's a table wine from a region nobody had heard of, and everybody started to take notice. Let's talk about Tignello and Solea. Marchesi, Antinori. This is one of the oldest wine families in the world. 26 generations. Piero Antinori released Tignello in 1971, which is a blend of Sangiovese with Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc, which is aged in French barriques. So this is super revolutionary. It's Sangiovese treated like a first growth grape. Solaya came later, and it flipped that blend. It's mostly Cabernet Sauvignon, but these are both total icons. Ornellaia was founded in 1981 in Bulgari. It's right near Sassicaia, and it was founded by Lodovico Antinori, Piero's brother. It's classic Bordeaux blend. So it's got Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot. It's a super Tuscan in the purest sense that it is really the Bordeaux grapes. But the real collector's story here is Masseto. A 100% Merlot. It's made from a single vineyard of the blue clay in the Ornellaia estate. And this became Italy's answer to Petrus. Production is super tiny. It's like 30,000 bottles, and the prices rival the top wines in Bordeaux. Masseto actually separated from Ornellaia as its own estate in 2012, which kind of gives you some idea of how important it became. Other names that you should know. Bizerno. Lodovico Antinori's next project after leaving Ornellaia, it's got that same Bulgari DNA. Petrolo. Galatrona. 100% Merlot from Valderona. Some people call it the other Masseto. Luco Sanjos makes it. It's incredible wine at just a fraction of that Masseto price. Tuorito. Redigaffi. Another 100% Merlot that got early Parker 100s, a total cult following. There's tiny production from Marima Coast, Lemeole, Mesorie, Bulgaria again. This is 100% Merlot. The late Eugenio Campolmo built this from basically nothing, and his wife Cinzia continues it. Tenuta San Guido. This is Sassicaia. The original, it's still the top. Now their second wine, Guidoberto, is a good entry point for collectors who want to try something that has a lot of the elements that you're going to find in the Sassicaia. Here's the irony. The Super Tuscans that were born as a table wine, like the lowest classification because the producers refused to follow the rules. Eventually, Italy created the EGT, the designation that was made basically to accommodate them. Sassicaia was given its own DOC, Bulgaria Sassicaia. It's actually the only single estate DOC in Italy. And so the rebels have become the establishment. What do collectors need to know? Let's talk about the classification system in Italy and why it's so confusing. Italy uses DOCG at the top, then DOC, then IGT, then Vino de Tavola at the bottom. But this is the key thing. The classification actually is about regulatory compliance. It's not about quality. Some of Italy's greatest wines are IGT. Sassicaia was a table wine. Solera withdrew from DOCG entirely. Gaja declassified his top wines. Don't judge an Italian wine by its legal classification. You're going to need to judge it by its producer, aging potential. Grape Barolo and Brunello are built to age as long as anything you have in your cellar. Montalcino can last 50 plus years. Biondi Sante Reservas from the 1950s, still alive and kicking. Nebbiolo and Sangiovese both have high tannin and high acidity. These are the things that wines need to age. Super Tuscans are generally more approachable young, but frankly, the best ones, Sassicaia, Ornellaia, Masseto, 20, 30 years easy. Vintage variation actually matters much more in Italy than basically anywhere, and that has to do with the large swings. The climate is just super variable there, much more so than Bordeaux or Napa. So let me give you the great vintages for Barolo. 2010, 13, 16, 19, and 20. For Brunello, 2010, 12, 15, 16, 19. The gap between a great and average vintage is wider in Italy than in most places. Pay attention to the year on the bottle. All right, provenance and storage. Now, these are the same rules everywhere in my series here. Professional storage, original packaging when possible. Italian wines are shipped globally, and heat damage, that's a real risk, especially for anything crossing the Atlantic in the summer. So make sure you're buying from reputable import sources. Italian fine wine has historically traded at a discount to Bordeaux and Burgundy, and that's changing. The Livex Italian 100 has shown that there's a very, very strong performance, and most of that's being driven by the Barolo and the top Super Tuscans. Let's talk about the price tiers. Let's start at the entry level. The entry collectible, $50 to $150. Produttore dei Barbaresco single vineyard wines, Foligni Brunello. La Serre Nuove, that's the Ornellaia second wine. Gualberto from Tenuta Sanguio Sassicaias. These are really great wine with real pedigrees, and these prices shouldn't scare you off. Let's go to the mid-range, $150 to $400. Single Cru Barolo from Vieti, Forzillo, Giuseppe Mascarello, Brunello Reserva from Casanova de Neri, Sassicaia, Ornellaia, Tignanello in great vintages. Let's go to Sirius, $400 to $1,000. Giacomo Conterno, Casina Francia, Brunello, Giacoso, the Red Label Reserva, Solaya, Masseto on release. Trophy, this is $1,000 plus. Monfortino, Biondi Sante Reserva from great vintages. Soldera, Casabase, Masseto back vintages, Giacosa Reservas from legendary years. Now, the opportunity in Italian wine for collectors is still undervalued relative to comparable quality in Bordeaux and Burgundy. A Montefortino is one of the greatest wines made anywhere on earth, and it trades at a fraction of what DRC or Latour commands. And that gap may not last forever. Now, the question is, do you need Italian wine? If you've been watching this series, you already know the answer. No, you do not need any one region to be a collector. But let me make an argument for why Italy deserves a place in your cellar. It offers something that no other region in this series does, which is range. The distance between a traditional Barolo and a modern Super Tuscan is enormous. They're basically different categories of wine, yet both are first class. Both are collectible world-class wines that require and reward patience. But let's do the smart approach here. Start with the entry points. Get the Produttore dei Barbaresco. That way you understand Nebbiolo. Rosso de Montalcino from a great producer to understand Sangiovese. La Serre Nuove or Guadalberto to understand the Super Tuscan style. Then go deeper into whatever world speaks to you. I'll tell you what the real Italian advantage is. It's the food connection. Italian wine, especially Sangiovese, is designed to be at your dinner table. If Bordeaux is tradition, Burgundy is terroir, Champagne is celebration, and California is ambition, Italy is soul. Italian wine carries more history than any other region we've covered. It has all the drama, the family feuds, the wine wars, the scandals, rebels who became icons, wine dumped all over the floor. But it has something else. It's the purest expression of the idea that wine is not a luxury product or an investment vehicle. It's something you put on the table with food and serve it to the people you love. Every other region in this series has tried at some level to emulate this Italian spirit. Barolo's sense of place, Brunello's discipline, the Super Tuscans' refusal to accept limits. That's worth collecting, and that's worth cellar space. And honestly, that's worth the trip. Italy comes down to three worlds: Barolo, Nebbiolo, villages, vineyards, tradition versus modernity. Brunello, Sangiovese, one town, strict rules, great patience. Super Tuscans, rebels who broke every regulation and have made some of the most celebrated wines in the entire world. Remember, start with the entry points, learn the producers, pay special attention to vintages. They're going to matter so much more here than anywhere else in the world. And guess what? This is the place that I tell you, if you can visit it, visit. There is no substitute for eating pasta in Montalcino with a bottle of Brunello, or truffle season in Piedmont with a Barolo that's been waiting 15 years to finally be opened. Drop a comment. Tell me about your favorite Italian wine or the producer that you're most curious about. And maybe encourage me to pop that bottle of masseto I've been holding and waiting and waiting. Cheers.